The morning of October 15, 2157, began like any other aboard the research vessel Serenity's Edge. Dr. Elena Vasquez was reviewing bacterial culture samples in her xenobiology lab when the ship's proximity alarms began their haunting wail. She had been expecting this moment for 3 years, ever since the Kepler array detected the massive alien construct approaching the Sol system at a velocity that defied conventional physics. The alien vessel materialized from hyperspace 2 astronomical units from Earth, its crystalline structure spanning nearly 40 kilometers in diameter. The Zephyrian Collective, as they would later identify themselves, had traveled from the Vega system specifically to initiate first contact with humanity. Their arrival was both magnificent and terrifying, a testament to technological advancement that made human achievements seem primitive by comparison. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of humanity's most advanced exploration vessel, watching the alien craft through reinforced transparasteel windows. The Serenity's Edge had been hastily retrofitted as humanity's first diplomatic vessel, equipped with the most sophisticated translation matrices and communication arrays available. What they couldn't have prepared for was the biological catastrophe that would unfold in the following hours. The Zephyrians made first contact through a series of mathematical sequences transmitted across multiple frequencies. Their message was elegant in its simplicity: peaceful intentions, desire for knowledge exchange, and a request for direct meeting. Ambassador Sarah Wellington, Earth's most experienced diplomat, had spent months preparing for this moment. Her team included linguists, xenobiologists, cultural anthropologists, and military advisors, all carefully selected for their expertise and psychological stability. Dr. Vasquez found herself at the center of preparations as the lead xenobiologist. Her role was crucial: to assess any potential biological incompatibilities and ensure the safety of both species during contact. She had spent years studying theoretical alien physiology, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of the Zephyrian biological structure. The first shuttle arrived exactly 72 hours after initial contact. The Zephyrian delegation consisted of 5 beings, each standing nearly 3 meters tall, with translucent gelatinous skin that revealed complex internal structures resembling crystalline networks rather than traditional organs. Their communication occurred through bioluminescent patterns across their skin, supplemented by harmonic vibrations that their translation devices interpreted into recognizable language. Ambassador Kithara, the Zephyrian delegation leader, possessed an otherworldly grace that immediately captivated the human crew. Her skin shifted through prismatic colors as she communicated, creating an almost hypnotic display. Through their translation matrix, her first words to humanity were both profound and prophetic. "We have journeyed across the void to meet the warrior poets of Terra. Your reputation precedes you among the civilized worlds." The meeting took place in the specially constructed neutral chamber aboard Serenity's Edge. Both species had agreed to maintain environmental separation initially, communicating through advanced barrier fields that allowed visual and auditory contact while preventing direct physical interaction. This precaution, suggested by Dr. Vasquez's team, would prove to be the only thing that prevented an immediate catastrophe. Ambassador Wellington began the proceedings with formal diplomatic protocols, welcoming the Zephyrian delegation to human space and expressing humanity's desire for peaceful relations. The conversation flowed smoothly through translation matrices, covering basic cultural exchanges, technological philosophies, and mutual scientific interests. The Zephyrians revealed they were part of a vast galactic community comprising hundreds of intelligent species, all united under principles of peaceful coexistence and knowledge sharing. What struck Dr. Vasquez immediately was the Zephyrians' apparent fragility. Their movements were deliberate and careful, as though they existed in a constant state of environmental vulnerability. When she discreetly scanned them with her instruments, the readings were extraordinary. Their entire biological structure operated on principles completely alien to terrestrial life. Their immune systems, such as they were, seemed designed for an environment devoid of aggressive pathogens. The revelation came during what should have been a routine atmospheric compatibility test. Dr. Vasquez had prepared samples of Earth's atmosphere in sealed containers, intending to gradually introduce trace amounts to test Zephyrian tolerance. The process was meant to be entirely safe, microscopic quantities released in controlled conditions with full isolation protocols in place. The disaster began with a single molecule. When Dr. Vasquez opened the atmospheric sample container in her sealed laboratory, the tiniest trace of Earth air escaped through the laboratory's filtration system. The ship's environmental controls, designed to maintain perfect atmospheric balance, distributed this minuscule contamination throughout the ventilation network. Within minutes, it reached the neutral chamber where the diplomatic meeting continued. Ambassador Kithara was the first to react. Her prismatic skin began shifting rapidly through colors that the translation system couldn't interpret. The other Zephyrians immediately moved away from her, their own skin patterns flashing in what appeared to be alarm signals. Through the translation matrix, Kythara's words came through in broken fragments. Contamination, biological warfare, impossible toxicity levels. Dr. Vasquez rushed to her monitoring station, pulling up real-time biological readings from the neutral chamber. What she saw defied comprehension. The atmospheric contamination was so minimal that human sensors could barely detect it. Perhaps a few thousand molecules of standard Earth air mixed with the chamber's controlled environment. Yet the Zephyrians were reacting as though they had been exposed to concentrated poison. Captain Chen immediately initiated emergency protocols, sealing the chamber and activating full atmospheric purification systems. But the damage was already done. Ambassador Kythara's skin had lost its luminescent properties and was becoming increasingly opaque. The other Zephyrians maintained their distance, their own patterns shifting into what the computer interpreted as expressions of horror and disbelief. Your atmosphere, Kythara managed to communicate before her translation device failed, contains biological agents that dissolve our molecular structure. How do you survive in such toxicity? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Dr. Vasquez realized with growing horror that what humans considered normal atmospheric conditions, oxygen, nitrogen, trace gases, and the countless microorganisms that existed in every breath, was essentially a biological weapon to the Zephyrians. Their species had evolved in ultra-clean environments, their biology adapted to pristine conditions that humans would consider sterile to the point of being uninhabitable. Ambassador Wellington attempted to maintain diplomatic composure, but the situation was rapidly deteriorating. The Zephyrian delegation was backing toward their shuttle, their skin patterns now flashing in synchronized sequences that required no translation, pure terror. Through failing communication systems, fragments of their conversation reached the human crew. Impossible. How can they live in such contamination? Biological warfare species must warn the collective. Dr. Vasquez made a desperate attempt to explain the situation. Through emergency communication channels, she broadcast her findings to the Zephyrian shuttle. We mean no harm. This is our natural environment. We didn't know it would affect your physiology. Please, let us help. The response came from the shuttle as it began emergency departure procedures. Help? You breathe death itself. Your entire world is a biological weapon. No species should be able to survive such conditions. What manner of beings are you? As the Zephyrian shuttle retreated toward their main vessel, Dr. Vasquez began to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization had ended in disaster, not through aggression or misunderstanding, but through the simple act of breathing. Earth's atmosphere, teeming with life that humans took for granted, was apparently lethal to a species that had achieved interstellar travel. The Serenity's Edge received one final transmission from the Zephyrian vessel before it departed. We came seeking knowledge and found terror. Your species exists in conditions that would destroy most galactic civilizations. We must report this to the collective. Humanity will be classified as a biological hazard until further assessment can be completed. Captain Chen ordered all communication arrays to maintain contact as long as possible, but the alien vessel activated its hyperdrive and vanished from local space within hours of the failed meeting. Humanity's first diplomatic contact had lasted less than 8 hours and ended with Earth's classification as a biologically dangerous world. In the aftermath, Dr. Vasquez and her team worked frantically to understand what had gone wrong. Their analysis revealed the shocking truth. Earth's biosphere, which had seemed normal and even beneficial to human development, was actually an extraordinarily harsh environment by galactic standards. The constant presence of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microorganisms had forced human evolution along a path that created beings capable of surviving in what most aliens would consider a toxic wasteland. The implications were staggering. Every human carried trillions of microorganisms, breathed air filled with biological agents, and lived in an environment that was apparently lethal to the majority of galactic civilization. Humanity hadn't just developed immunity to biological threats, they had become biological threats themselves, walking repositories of death to species that had evolved in cleaner environments. Part 2. The Reckoning. The months following first contact brought a revelation that would forever change humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. Dr.E. Elena Vasquez had become the reluctant expert on what military strategists were now calling humanity's biological advantage, though she preferred the more clinical term differential environmental adaptation syndrome. The data was overwhelming and terrifying in its implications. Analysis of the atmospheric samples that had caused the Zephyrian crisis revealed that Earth's air contained approximately 10 circumflex, 15 bacterial organisms per cubic meter, along with countless viral particles, fungal spores, and other microbiological entities. To put this in perspective, a single human breath contained more potentially lethal organisms than most galactic species would encounter in their entire lifetimes. Colonel James Mitchell, recently assigned as military liaison to the Xenobiology Project, reviewed Dr. Cosma Vasquez's findings with a mixture of fascination and concern. His background in biological warfare made him uniquely qualified to understand the strategic implications of humanity's newfound status as an inadvertent biological weapon. What worried him most was not what humanity might do with this knowledge, but how the galaxy might react to Earth's existence. "Doctor," Colonel Mitchell said during one of their regular briefings, "you're telling me that simply by existing, every human being is essentially a walking violation of galactic biological safety protocols?" Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. "It's worse than that, Colonel. Our preliminary analysis suggests that human skin constantly sheds billions of microorganisms into the environment. We exhale bacterial clouds with every breath. We're not just carriers, we're active biological contamination sources. From the perspective of species like the Zephyrians, we're the equivalent of mobile biological warfare units." The scientific team had been working around the clock to understand the broader implications. Dr. Sarah Chen, the team's evolutionary biologist, had developed what she called the Terran toxicity hypothesis. According to her research, Earth's unusually harsh biosphere had created evolutionary pressures that forced life forms to develop extraordinary resistance to biological threats. This resistance came at a cost. Earth species, particularly humans, had become walking ecosystems of potentially dangerous microorganisms. "Consider the human immune system," Dr. Chen explained during a presentation to the Joint Scientific and Military Committee. "We've always thought of it as defensive, protecting us from disease. But from an alien perspective, our immune system is actually an adaptive biological warfare system. It constantly identifies threats, develops countermeasures, and maintains an arsenal of defensive responses that could be weaponized against species lacking similar adaptations." The committee members shifted uncomfortably as the implications became clear. Humanity's greatest strength, their ability to survive in Earth's challenging environment, was also potentially their greatest liability in galactic politics. They had spent decades preparing for first contact, developing diplomatic protocols and cultural exchange programs, only to discover that their mere presence was an existential threat to most alien civilizations. Ambassador Sarah Wellington, still recovering from the trauma of the failed first contact, had been reassigned to head a new initiative called the Biological Compatibility Assessment Program. Her task was to develop protocols for future alien contact that would prevent the kind of disaster that had occurred with the Zephyrians. It was proving to be an impossible challenge. "We're dealing with a fundamental incompatibility," Ambassador Wellington reported. "It's not cultural or technological, it's biological. How do you establish diplomatic relations with species that can't share the same space without risking their lives?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Marcus Webb, a specialist in extremophile organisms, had been studying Earth's most hardy life forms, bacteria that survived in volcanic vents, organisms that thrived in radioactive environments, and microbes that could exist in the vacuum of space. His research suggested that humanity's biological resilience was not just unusual, but potentially unprecedented in galactic terms. "I've been analyzing the data from our encounter with the Zephyrians," Dr. Webb explained to the assembled committee. "Their reaction wasn't just to our microorganisms, it was to the sheer biological diversity and aggressiveness of Earth's life forms. From their perspective, we don't just carry dangerous organisms. We are dangerous organisms. Our entire biology is adapted to survive in conditions that would destroy most galactic life." This led to what Dr. Vasquez would later call the Great Revelation, the understanding that humanity's position in the galaxy was not as hopeful explorers seeking to join a cosmic community, but as potential conquerors whose very existence represented an existential threat to established civilizations. The irony was devastating. Humanity's dreams of peaceful first contact had been shattered by their own biological success. The military implications were not lost on Colonel Mitchell and his team. Within weeks of the failed first contact, classified reports were circulating through Earth's defense networks outlining scenarios for biological warfare capabilities that humanity had never known it possessed. The reports made for disturbing reading. Theoretical deployment scenarios, read one classified document, suggest that human presence in any environment would gradually render that environment uninhabitable for most known galactic species. Standard human colonization protocols, the introduction of Earth-based agriculture, atmospheric processing, and biological waste management would constitute weapons of mass destruction from the perspective of alien civilizations. Dr. Vasquez found herself at the center of increasingly urgent military briefings. Her role had evolved from xenobiologist to strategic advisor on humanity's most unexpected weapon system, themselves. The questions being asked were no longer about peaceful contact, but about survival in a galaxy that might view Earth as a biological threat requiring containment or elimination. What you're describing, she told Colonel Mitchell during one particularly tense briefing, is the possibility that humanity might be forced into the role of galactic aggressor simply by existing. Our biology doesn't give us a choice. We can't stop being biological threat vectors any more than we can stop breathing. The psychological impact on the scientific team was severe. They had dedicated their lives to the dream of joining a galactic community, only to discover that their participation might require the destruction of that same community. Dr. Chen began suffering from what military psychologists classified as biological guilt syndrome, the crushing realization that her very existence was potentially genocidal. Meanwhile, long-range sensors were detecting increased activity in the Vega system. The Zephyrian Collective appeared to be mobilizing resources on a scale that suggested preparation for major operations. Intelligence analysts feared the worst, that Earth was about to face a preemptive strike from a galactic community determined to eliminate the biological threat that humanity represented. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Dr. Vasquez's graduate student, Maria Santos, had been analyzing bacterial samples from the failed first contact when she made a discovery that would change everything. The trace amounts of Zephyrian biological material left behind in the neutral chamber revealed something extraordinary about their physiology. Professor, Maria announced during a late-night research session, the Zephyrian cellular structure isn't just vulnerable to our microorganisms, it's completely dependent on ultra-pure environmental conditions. But look at this. She pulled up microscopic images that showed Zephyrian cells beginning to adapt to Earth contaminants. Dr. Vasquez studied the data with growing excitement. They're not just dying from exposure, they're evolving. Their cellular structure is attempting to adapt to our biological environment. It's killing them because the adaptation process is too rapid and uncontrolled, but the potential for biological compatibility exists. This discovery led to what would become known as the adaptation protocol, a theoretical framework for gradually introducing alien species to Earth's biological environment in controlled stages, allowing their cellular structure to adapt without experiencing the catastrophic shock that had nearly killed Ambassador Kithara. Colonel Mitchell was skeptical. You're suggesting we can somehow make aliens immune to our biological presence? That seems optimistic, Doctor. Not immune, Dr. Vasquez corrected. Compatible. We're not trying to eliminate the threat. We're trying to create controlled exposure that allows adaptation over time. It's similar to how humans build immunity to diseases through vaccination, but on a cellular level. The implications were staggering. If successful, the adaptation protocol could transform humanity from a biological threat into a biological catalyst, a species capable of enhancing other civilizations' environmental resilience rather than destroying them. It was a radical reframing of humanity's role in galactic politics. Dr. Webb expanded on the concept. Consider the possibility that Earth's harsh biosphere wasn't a curse, but a gift. Our biological resilience could be exactly what the galaxy needs to survive in harsher environments, explore dangerous worlds, and adapt to changing conditions. Instead of being destroyers, we could be enhancers. The theory was elegant but untested. They needed subjects for controlled experimentation, and the only available subjects were the trace biological samples left behind by the Zephyrian delegation. Working with microscopic amounts of alien cellular material, Dr. Vasquez's team began the painstaking process of developing adaptation protocols. The work was dangerous and ethically complex. They were essentially conducting biological experiments on the cellular remains of a sentient species without that species' consent. However, the alternatives, potential galactic war or humanity's permanent isolation, made the moral calculus even more complicated. As weeks turned into months, the team made steady progress. They developed techniques for gradual biological exposure that allowed Zephyrian cellular material to adapt to increasing levels of Earth contamination without experiencing catastrophic breakdown. The process was slow and required precise environmental control, but it worked. More importantly, The adapted Zephyrian cells showed enhanced resistance to a wide range of biological threats. The exposure to Earth's diverse microbiological environment had essentially trained their cellular defenses to handle challenges they had never encountered. Dr. Vasquez realized they had stumbled upon something unprecedented, a method for biological enhancement that could benefit alien species rather than harming them. The discovery coincided with disturbing intelligence reports from the outer system. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching from the direction of Vega, hundreds of vessels of unknown configuration moving towards Sol at velocities that suggested advanced propulsion technology. The Zephyrian Collective was coming, and their intentions were unclear. Part 3. The Transformation. The fleet that emerged from hyperspace 3 months after the failed first contact was unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. Over 400 vessels of varying sizes arranged themselves in a defensive formation around the outer planets, their crystalline structures creating a barrier that effectively surrounded the Sol system. The Zephyrian Collective hadn't come for revenge. They had come for answers. Admiral Rebecca Torres, recently appointed as Earth's Supreme Military Commander, watched the fleet deployment from the bridge of the newly commissioned battle station Defiant. The station represented humanity's most advanced military technology, hastily constructed in the months following first contact. It was armed with every conventional weapon in Earth's arsenal. Yet, Admiral Torres knew that against the demonstrated technology of the Zephyrian Collective, it would be little more than a gesture. 437 vessels confirmed, reported Commander Lisa Park from the tactical station. Energy signatures suggest they're maintaining defensive positions, not assault formations. They're not here to attack, at least not immediately. Dr. Vasquez had been transported to Defiant, along with her entire research team and months of experimental data. The adaptation protocol research had reached a critical breakthrough just days before the fleet's arrival, and the timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. Ambassador Wellington, now serving as humanity's chief negotiator, reviewed the scientific findings with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "You're telling me that we can actually help them?" Ambassador Wellington asked during the emergency briefing. "That our biological presence, properly controlled, could enhance their species rather than destroying it?" Dr. Vasquez nodded, pulling up holographic displays of their experimental results. "The cellular adaptation process we've developed doesn't just create immunity to Earth's microbiological environment, it actually strengthens Zephyrian cellular structure. Their adapted cells show resistance to radiation, temperature extremes, and toxic compounds that would have been lethal to their original biology. We've essentially discovered a form of biological enhancement." Colonel Mitchell, now promoted to general and serving as military advisor to the operation, studied the data with professional skepticism. "This is all theoretical, Doctor. We've only tested it on cellular samples, not living beings. The risk of failure is enormous, and if we're wrong, we could be committing genocide." The moral weight of the situation was crushing. Humanity's first attempt at alien diplomacy had nearly killed the alien delegation. Now they were proposing an experimental biological treatment that could either save the Zephyrian species or destroy them entirely. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The breakthrough came through an unexpected communication from the Zephyrian fleet. Instead of demands for Earth's surrender or threats of retaliation, they transmitted a message that changed everything. "We have come to understand the warrior poets of Terra. Your biology is both curse and gift. We seek the path of transformation." Ambassador Kithara, somehow recovered from her near-fatal exposure to Earth's atmosphere, appeared on the main communication screen. Her appearance had changed dramatically. Her translucent skin now showed traces of opacity, and her bioluminescent patterns had shifted to deeper, more complex colors. When she spoke, her words carried implications that stunned the human delegation. "People of Terra," Kithara began, "we have analyzed the biological contamination from our first meeting. Your microorganisms did not simply attack our cellular structure, they challenged it, forced it to adapt, made it stronger. Those of us who survived the initial exposure have undergone changes we did not think possible." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, studying Kithara's transformed appearance through the communication link. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. The Zephyrian ambassador showed signs of biological resilience that hadn't been present during their first encounter. Somehow, her surviving the atmospheric exposure had triggered adaptations in her physiology. "We understand now," Kithara continued, "that your species evolved not as destroyers, but as catalysts. Your biological environment creates challenges that force evolutionary advancement. What we experienced as toxicity was actually opportunity, the chance to become more than we were." Admiral Torres exchanged glances with Ambassador Wellington. This wasn't the conversation they had expected to have with an alien fleet that could potentially destroy human civilization. "Ambassador Kithara," Wellington responded, Are you suggesting that the biological exposure was beneficial to your species? Beneficial is too simple a word, Cathara replied. Transformational would be more accurate. Those of us who survived have capabilities we never possessed. Resistance to environmental challenges that previously would have killed us, enhanced sensory perception, improved cognitive processing speed. Your biological environment didn't just contaminate us, it evolved us. The implications hit Dr. Vasquez like a physical blow. The adaptation protocol they had been developing wasn't just a method for making aliens compatible with Earth's environment. It was a pathway for directed evolution, a form of biological enhancement that could fundamentally improve alien species. Humanity's role in the galaxy wasn't as destroyers or even as reluctant warriors, but as biological catalysts capable of triggering evolutionary advancement in other species. General Mitchell immediately grasped the strategic implications. If what she's saying is true, then every species that successfully adapts to human biological presence becomes stronger, more resilient, better equipped for survival. We're not weapons, we're evolutionary accelerators. Dr. Webb, who had joined the conversation via communication link from his laboratory, added crucial context. This explains why Earth's biosphere is so aggressive and diverse. We weren't just surviving in a harsh environment, we were being constantly challenged and improved by it. Every generation became more resilient than the last. We're the product of billions of years of biological enhancement through environmental challenge. Ambassador Cathara's next words confirmed their developing understanding. The collective has debated your species' fate for months. Some called for your containment, others for your destruction. But a few of us understood the truth. You represent the next stage of galactic evolution. Your biological environment doesn't just test species for survival, it creates the conditions for advancement. Dr. Vasquez found herself at the center of discussions that would determine the future of human-alien relations. The adaptation protocol research, initially conceived as a desperate attempt to prevent biological warfare, had become the foundation for a new form of interspecies cooperation. Rather than avoiding biological contact, alien species could voluntarily undergo controlled exposure to Earth's environment to trigger evolutionary enhancements in their own biology. The process would have to be carefully managed, Dr. Vasquez explained during a joint briefing with both human and Zephyrian representatives. Gradual exposure over extended periods, constant medical monitoring, intervention protocols if adaptation fails. We're essentially proposing controlled evolution, which carries enormous risk. Commander Park raised the obvious concern. What about species that can't adapt? Not every alien biology might be capable of the kind of transformation the Zephyrians experienced. We could still be looking at mass casualties. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Santos, whose analysis had led to the discovery of Zephyrian adaptation, had been quietly working on compatibility assessments using theoretical alien biology models. Her findings suggested that the adaptation process might be more universal than anyone had imagined. Professor, she announced during one of the research sessions, I've been running models based on different theoretical alien physiologies. The adaptation process appears to be scalable across a wide range of biological structures. It's not specific to Zephyrian biology. It's a general principle of biological enhancement through environmental challenge. This revelation transformed the entire framework of human-alien relations. Instead of being a unique threat to Zephyrian biology, Earth's environment represented a potential enhancement opportunity for most forms of alien life. The biological agents that made up humanity's natural ecosystem could serve as evolutionary catalysts for any species capable of surviving the initial adaptation process. Admiral Torres recognized the strategic implications immediately. We're not just talking about defense anymore. We're talking about Earth becoming the galactic center for biological enhancement. Every species that wants to improve their evolutionary resilience would need to come to us. Ambassador Wellington began drafting what would become known as the Terra Accords, a comprehensive framework for interspecies biological enhancement cooperation. The Accords outlined protocols for voluntary adaptation procedures, established Earth as a neutral zone for evolutionary research, and created safeguards to prevent the misuse of humanity's biological capabilities. The negotiations were complex and often tense. Many Zephyrian representatives remained skeptical about the safety of the adaptation process, while human military advisors worried about the security implications of allowing unlimited alien access to Earth's biosphere. Dr. Vasquez found herself serving as both scientific advisor and diplomatic mediator, explaining the biological processes to aliens while addressing human concerns about planetary security. The breakthrough came when Ambassador Cathara volunteered to undergo the full adaptation protocol under controlled laboratory conditions. Her willingness to risk her life for the advancement of both species created the trust necessary for meaningful cooperation. The procedure took place aboard a specially constructed research station positioned at the edge of Sol system, equally accessible to both human and Zephyrian medical teams. The process was excruciating to observe. Over a period of 6 weeks, Kythara was gradually exposed to increasing concentrations of Earth's atmospheric composition and microbiological environment. Her cellular structure underwent constant transformation, sometimes appearing to break down completely before rebuilding itself in more resilient configurations. Dr. Vasquez monitored every stage of the process, ready to intervene if adaptation failed. But it didn't fail. Not only did Kythara survive the complete adaptation process, she emerged transformed in ways that exceeded their most optimistic projections. Her enhanced physiology showed resistance to radiation levels that would have been instantly lethal to unmodified Zephyrians, temperature tolerance that expanded her environmental range by thousands of degrees, and cognitive processing speeds that had increased by nearly 40%. "I am no longer purely Zephyrian," Kythara announced after the procedure was complete. "Nor am I human. I am something new, a bridge between our species, capable of existing in environments that would destroy my original biology. This is not contamination or conquest, this is evolution." The success of Kythara's transformation opened the floodgates for widespread interspecies cooperation. Within months, research stations throughout the Sol system were conducting adaptation procedures for volunteers from dozens of alien species. Earth had become the galaxy's center for biological enhancement, with humanity serving as guides and partners in directed evolutionary advancement. Dr. Vasquez established the Terran Institute for Biological Enhancement, a research organization dedicated to developing safe and effective adaptation protocols for different alien physiologies. Her work expanded beyond simple survival enhancement to include specialized modifications for specific environments, adaptations for high-radiation worlds, extreme temperature planets, and even vacuum-based habitats. The most profound change came in humanity's understanding of their own nature. They were no longer the aggressive warriors that many alien species had feared, nor were they the peaceful explorers they had imagined themselves to be. They were evolutionary catalysts, a species whose harsh biological environment had created the tools necessary to enhance and advance other forms of life throughout the galaxy. General Mitchell summed up the transformation during a staff meeting months after the first successful adaptations. "We spent so much time worrying about being too dangerous for the galaxy that we never considered we might be exactly what the galaxy needed. Our biology isn't a weapon, it's a gift that can make every species we encounter stronger and more capable." The Terran Accords were signed exactly 1 year after first contact, establishing Earth as a neutral zone dedicated to interspecies biological research and enhancement. Humanity had found their place in the galactic community, not as conquerors or victims, but as partners in the ongoing evolution of intelligent life throughout the universe. Dr. Vasquez often reflected on the journey from that first catastrophic contact to the thriving research community that now surrounded Earth. The day aliens learned humans were biologically lethal had become the day they discovered humans were biologically transformational. The species that had nearly destroyed their first alien visitors had become the key to unlocking evolutionary advancement for civilizations across the galaxy. As she watched adapted beings from dozens of species working together in laboratories that surrounded Earth, Dr. Vasquez realized that Ambassador Kythara had been right from the beginning. Humans were warrior poets not because they fought and destroyed, but because they faced biological challenges that would defeat most species and transform those challenges into opportunities for growth and advancement. The galaxy had learned that humans were biologically lethal, but more importantly, they had discovered that this lethality was also the source of humanity's greatest gift, the ability to catalyze evolution and enhancement in any species brave enough to undergo the transformation. Earth had become not humanity's fortress, but the galaxy's workshop for creating better, stronger, more resilient forms of intelligent life. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, and humanity had discovered that their apparent weakness, their dependence on a harsh, contaminated biosphere, was actually their greatest strength. They had evolved beyond the need to destroy their enemies by transforming their enemies into allies, creating a galaxy where biological diversity wasn't a source of conflict, but a foundation for mutual enhancement and growth. In the end, the shocking day aliens learned humans were biologically lethal became the magnificent day the galaxy learned that biological lethality could be transformed into biological gift, creating possibilities for evolution and advancement that would benefit every form of intelligent life. Among the stars,